The first insult came wrapped in silken laughter. "Why don't you give it a try, kid?" Daniel Harrow, one of the city's most expensive lawyers, leaned back in his leather chair, swirling whiskey in a glass that probably cost more than my mom's monthly paycheck. "It'll be a good laugh." I didn't laugh. My mom's eyes darted to me from where she stood by the marble counter, polishing silver that wasn't hers. She gave me the smallest shake of her head, her silent way of telling me to keep my mouth shut. But Harrow's smirk hung in the air like a dare. That's how I ended up sitting at the massive oak desk in his study, a mock case file in front of me. Supposed to be for fun, like he said. Supposed to show the Maid'S boy how complicated real law was. Supposed to keep me in my place. Only thing is, law isn't complicated when you've been reading case files since you were 12. When your idea of summer break is watching Supreme Court oral arguments on YouTube while the rest of the neighborhood plays basketball. It all started the week Harrow decided to defend a developer accused of evicting dozens of black families without proper notice. "Business is business," he told my mom while she scrubbed his floors. I was in the kitchen that day, doing my homework, listening. His tone wasn't cruel, just certain. Like it never even occurred to him that someone's roof mattered as much as his client's profits. He didn't know that I'd already read about the case in the paper, that I'd downloaded the court filings, that I'd noticed the defense's argument had a glaring weakness, sitting right there in the lease agreements like a ticking time bomb. But Harrow's world wasn't built for someone like me to point that out. So when he tossed that file on the desk and said, "Let's see how you'd argue this, boy," I felt my pulse steady instead of spike. I wasn't here to impress him. I wasn't here for revenge. I just wanted him to know, if only for 5 minutes, that the ground he stood on wasn't as solid as he thought. "All right," I said, flipping open the folder. "Let's start with your first mistake." His brow shot up. The room went still except for the faint clink of my mom's silver polish bottle in the background. I began laying out my reasoning, one clause at a time, citing a 1998 housing rights precedent that his legal team had either overlooked or assumed the plaintiff's lawyer would miss. Harrow's smirk faded by degree. He leaned forward, tapping the arm of his chair, as if trying to decide whether I was guessing or actually knew what I was talking about. "You've been reading law books?" he finally asked. "Relax. It's harmless." He looked back at me. "Unless you're scared." I wasn't scared, but I knew what this was. A stage, set just for me to trip on, so he could laugh later over cocktails about the Maid's kid who thought he could play lawyer. I smiled anyway. "I'll be there." The courthouse smelled like old wood and bad coffee. I wore the only suit I owned, navy, a little too big in the shoulders, sleeves brushing my knuckles. Harrow stood beside me, immaculate in his tailored jacket, greeting half the room by first name. He introduced me to his client like I was a novelty act. "This is Jamal. He's going to try a little courtroom magic for us today." The developer, a slick man with gold cufflinks, barely glanced at me. We sat at the defense table, the plaintiff's attorney, a tired-looking man in a brown suit, shuffling papers across from us. The judge entered, and everyone rose. My heart thudded once, hard, but then my focus kicked in. Harrow started with his formalities. Then, with a flourish, he said, "Your Honor, my associate has a brief point to make." I stood. My voice was steady. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to draw the court's attention to Section 42, subparagraph B of the lease agreement, which states that any eviction requires a 30-day written notice, regardless of payment status, unless a safety hazard is present. The defendant's own exhibits confirm that no such notice was given. Therefore, the eviction notices served were in violation of state housing law, rendering the removals unlawful." The plaintiff's lawyer blinked. The judge glanced at the documents. And Harrow froze. "Young man," the judge said slowly, "are you a licensed attorney?" "No, Your Honor. Just someone who reads a lot." The courtroom murmured. The plaintiff's lawyer began flipping through his file, realization dawning. I sat down. Harrow didn't look at me. Not right away. When he finally did, it wasn't with mockery. It was with something colder, like he'd just realized the punchline of his own joke was on him. And for the first time in my life, I knew the truth. Sometimes you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes, all you have to do is stand in the place they never thought you belonged and speak. Harrow's silence followed me all the way out of the courtroom. He walked fast, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. My mom trailed behind us, eyes darting between him and me, as if she was waiting for the explosion. "Where did you learn that?" he finally asked, his voice low. I shrugged. The law library downtown. They let anyone in. Anyone with the patience to read through 100 pages of statute, he muttered. You've got something, kid. Then his mouth twisted into a smirk again, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Still, beginner's luck. It wasn't luck, but I didn't bother telling him that. People like Harrow didn't believe in skill unless it came stamped with a diploma and the right last name. He stopped at the courthouse steps, turned, and studied me. There's a motion hearing next week. Not mine, friend of mine's got a case. You should come. Real stakes this time. My mom stiffened. Mr. Harrow, it's fine, he cut in. No one's paying him, Mrs. Brooks. Just think of it as a lesson. He smiled at me like he was offering a gift, but I could feel the weight behind it. It wasn't kindness. It was a test. That night, Mom made stew and kept her hands busy while she spoke. Jamal, you know why he's doing this, right? Because he thinks I'll screw up. She gave a tired smile. Exactly. People like him, if they see you do something once, they call it luck. Twice, they call it a fluke. Third time, that's when they start feeling threatened. I leaned back in my chair. Then I guess I'll have to get to the third time fast. She sighed, but I saw the flicker of pride in her eyes. The second case was uglier. Harrow's friend was defending a store owner accused of assaulting a black teenager. The defense claimed self-defense, but security footage blurry, but clear enough showed the store owner shoving the kid first. We sat in the back of the courtroom during the hearing. I kept my notebook open, jotting down every inconsistency in the defense's statements. Harrow leaned over once, glancing at my notes, but said nothing. When the judge called for arguments on a motion to dismiss, Harrow's friend Mr. Keller stepped up. He spoke well, polished, but his facts were brittle. Then Keller surprised everyone. Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I'd like to invite a young legal enthusiast to offer an alternative reading of the evidence. My head snapped up. Keller was grinning right at me. Harrow, sitting next to me, just smirked. I stood, feeling every eye in the room follow me. Thank you, Your Honor. The defense's claim of self-defense hinges on the idea that the victim posed an immediate threat. However, the video shows a gap of nearly 10 seconds between the verbal exchange and the physical shove. That's more than enough time for a reasonable person to disengage, as required by state statute before claiming self-defense. Keller's grin faded. The judge scribbled notes. The prosecutor perked up. I sat down. Harrow didn't say a word for the rest of the hearing. 2 days later, the case wasn't dismissed. And the victim's family lawyer contacted my mom. Said he wanted to meet me. We met in a diner, the kind where the coffee's always burnt but the booths feel safe. His name was Marcus Lang, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking impossible cases and winning them. I've seen kids like you before, he said after I explained how I'd gotten involved. Not many, and not often in your position. You've got two things most people never get: raw talent and nothing to lose. That's dangerous. I frowned. Dangerous for who? For the people who think they own the law. He leaned forward. Harrow's going to keep throwing you into these situations until either you fall on your face or you make him look bad. My advice: choose which one happens and when. A week later, Harrow invited me to his office. I've got a charity gala coming up, he said casually, flipping through papers. Black tie, boring speeches, fancy food. You should come. I raised an eyebrow. Why? Because half the city's power players will be there. Might as well see the game board if you're going to keep pretending you're a player. I didn't like the way he said pretending, but I went. The ballroom was glittering crystal chandeliers, tuxedos, gowns. My mom looked out of place in her modest dress, but she held her head high. I stuck close to her until Harrow waved me over to a group of men near the stage. This is Jamal, he said smoothly. The Maid'S kid who thinks he's the next Thurgood Marshall. Laughter rippled through the group. My stomach tightened. One man, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, stepped closer. You're the one who embarrassed Keller in court. I just pointed out a fact, I said evenly. Facts are dangerous in the wrong hands, he replied, and walked away. I didn't understand the warning then, but I would soon. The next morning, Harrow called me. You free this afternoon? For what? A real case. No training wheels. The courthouse was buzzing when we arrived. Harrow's client was a police officer accused of excessive force against a young black man during a traffic stop. The city was watching. This isn't a joke, my mom whispered as we walked in. I know, I said. And I did. This wasn't just about law anymore. This was about survival, mine, my mom's, and every kid who looked like me. The trial was already tense. The prosecution's case was strong. Dashcam footage, witness testimony, medical reports. Harrow's defense leaned on procedure, claiming the officer followed protocol. Halfway through the day, during a recess, Harrow pulled me aside. "You see something I don't?" I hesitated. "Your guy's story doesn't match his own report. He says the suspect reached for something before he drew his weapon, but the report says he saw the object after he fired." "That's a problem." Harrow studied me. "Can you get the jury to care?" I nodded. When court resumed, Harrow did something I didn't expect. "Your Honor," he said, "my associate will be conducting the next cross-examination." Gasps. The judge frowned. "Mr. Harrow, he's not. It's an exercise, Your Honor. The witness is my client. No risk of prejudice." The judge allowed it, reluctantly. I walked to the podium, my heart steady. I asked the officer to repeat his account. Then I read from his report, line by line, until the contradictions stacked up like bricks. By the time I sat down, the jurors were whispering. The officer's jaw was tight. Harrow was smiling, but it was different now. Less smug, more calculating. And I knew whatever game he was playing, I'd just changed the rules. The trial didn't explode right away. It simmered. The next morning, the local paper ran a small column. Teen questions officer's testimony in court. No picture, just a few sentences buried between city council updates and a bakery opening. But to my neighborhood, it was headline news. Mrs. Carter from down the block pressed the article into my mom's hands at the laundromat. "Your boy's making noise," she said. "Good noise." Mom smiled, but I could see the unease behind it. She'd spent her whole life trying not to make noise in places where she wasn't welcome. Now her son was banging on the door. Back in court, the atmosphere was shifting. The jurors leaned forward more when I spoke. The prosecutor started watching me like I was an uninvited co-counsel. And the officer's eyes, once bored, now tracked me every time I moved. On the third day, Harrow slid a stack of papers across the defense table. "Jury instructions draft," he said. "See if you can find something to work with." I scanned them. Buried halfway through was an instruction about reasonable perception of threat. The wording leaned heavily in favor of the defense. But it was based on a case from a different state, with looser standards than ours. "You use this," I told Harrow quietly, "and the prosecution will eat you alive on appeal." He studied me for a long moment. "Then fix it." So I did, rewriting the paragraph in language lifted directly from our state's higher court rulings. He submitted my draft without changing a word. The real break came on cross-examination of the department's use of force trainer. Harrow started the questioning, all routine. Then he turned to me. "Your turn, counselor." The trainer testified that the officer's actions were within acceptable guidelines. I asked him to read aloud the exact wording from the department manual about escalation. He did. Then I pulled out the dashcam transcript. "Can you show me where in these 48 seconds the suspect made any verbal or physical threat?" Silence. The jurors were stone still. The trainer cleared his throat. "It's implied." "Implied." I repeated. "Is implication in your manual, sir?" By the time I was done, the trainer looked like he wanted to sink into the witness stand. That night, Harrow drove us home himself. My mom sat in the front seat, stiff as a statue. "You're making a lot of enemies," he said, glancing at me in the rear view. "I thought I was on your side," I said. "You are. For now." He turned down our street. "But the more you make this about you, the more people will want to take you down. That includes people I play golf with." I met his eyes in the mirror. "Then maybe you need new golf partners." He didn't laugh. By the fourth day of trial, the press bench was full. A national cable network sent a crew. Someone even started a hashtag, "The Kid in Court." Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. One caught me on the way in. "Jamal, do you want to be a lawyer when you grow up?" I kept walking. "I don't want to grow up to be anything. I want to be something now." That quote made the evening news. The turning point came in the prosecution's rebuttal. They called the victim Marcus Hill to the stand. He was my age. He limped to the chair, a reminder of the shattered knee from the arrest. "Can you tell the court," the prosecutor asked, "what went through your mind when the officer pointed his gun at you?" Marcus's voice cracked. I thought I was about to die." The jury didn't look away. Neither did I. Harrow leaned over during a recess. "I need you to handle closing arguments." I blinked. "You're serious?" "You've already made them see him differently. Now make them see the whole case." I stood before the jury that afternoon, the weight of a city's anger and hope pressing down on me. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. The defense has asked you to believe that an unarmed teenager, standing still, was such a threat that a trained officer had no choice but to shoot. They've asked you to ignore the contradictions, the missing threats, the basic duty to protect life. But the law is not about ignoring. It's about seeing. Seeing the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. I pointed to Marcus. If you say the officer was justified, then you're saying that any of you any black kid walking home can be seen as a threat simply for existing. That's not law. That's fear. And fear should never hold more power in this room than truth. When I sat down, the courtroom was silent. Even Harrow didn't move. The verdict came the next day. Guilty. The gasp from the gallery was followed by applause. The judge had to gavel down. The officer's face was red. Marcus's mother sobbed into his shoulder. Reporters chased us down the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted, "Jamal, what's next for you?" I didn't answer. I was too busy noticing Harrow, standing a few steps back, watching me with that same calculating look. Because I knew this wasn't the end of the game. This was just the point where the people at the top started paying attention. And attention from them never came without a price. 3 days after the verdict, the threats began. The first was a phone call to our apartment, no voice, just breathing before the click. The second was an envelope slid under our door. Inside, a single printed sentence. "Stay out of court." Mom wanted to go to the police, but I didn't see the point. I just helped put one of their own behind bars. We both knew how that report would be filed if it was filed at all. Harrow called the next morning. "You've got enemies, kid," he said without preamble. "Not just racists in internet comment sections. People with money. People who'd rather buy a judge than risk another trial you touch. So you're warning me? I'm offering you an out. There's a scholarship fund I control. You take it, you go to law school, you disappear from the spotlight for a few years. By the time you come back, no one will care enough to stop you." It was tempting. Not because I wanted to hide, but because I could see the fear in Mom's eyes every time the phone rang. "Let me think about it," I said. That night, Marcus Lang, the civil rights attorney, showed up at our door. "You disappear now," he said, "and you send a message to every kid watching that you only get one shot at fighting back. That the rest of your life has to be about paying for that moment." He leaned in. "They want you quiet because you're dangerous to them now. And that means you're exactly where you need to be." The next case found me. A group of tenants in Harrow's own building, mostly elderly black residents, were being pushed out under renovation orders. I'd seen the notices in the lobby before, but now I understood what they meant. When I brought it up to Harrow, he didn't deny it. "Business," he said again, that same tone he'd used months ago. "Illegal business," I shot back. He smiled thinly. "Careful, Jamal. You're talking to the man who put you in front of your first jury. And I'm still talking." The tenants asked me to help. I told them I wasn't a lawyer. They told me they didn't care. So I dug in lease agreements, housing codes, city ordinances. The same pattern emerged. Notices served without cause, repairs scheduled that never happened, emergency relocations that turned permanent. We filed an injunction with Marcus Lang as lead counsel. And in a twist that made the papers explode, I was listed as co-author of the brief. The hearing was standing room only. Harrow represented the building's management, his own client base. When he stood to speak, his words were smooth as ever. But when it was my turn, I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Your Honor, the defense claims necessity for these evictions. But necessity means urgency. And urgency doesn't wait 6 months between notice and action. It doesn't evict tenants before permits are approved. It doesn't selectively choose the oldest, poorest residents to protect. That's not necessity. That's targeting." For the first time since I'd met him, Harrow looked tired. We won the injunction. The tenants stayed. The city opened an investigation into the building's ownership group, and my name was suddenly on every news site in the state. That night, Harrow showed up at our apartment. No suit, no smirk. "You could have been one of the best," he said quietly. "With the right mentors, the right cases. But you've chosen the hard road. Maybe that's the only road worth taking," I said. He shook his head. "The road's long, kid. And it's not the law that's going to break you, it's what they'll do outside of it." He left without saying goodbye. A week later, the scholarship offer arrived again. This time, I didn't even consider it. The next months were chaos, more cases, more attention, More late nights in the law library. People started calling me the courtroom kid, like it was a brand. But under it all, I stayed the same. The maid's son, who'd been told once to try it for fun. The work was exhausting. The hate mail kept coming. But so did the wins. And each one felt like a brick in something bigger than me. The last time I saw Harrow, it was in a different courtroom. I was assisting on a wrongful conviction appeal. He was representing the state's opposition. During a recess, he walked over. Still playing hero? Still playing gatekeeper? I shot back. He smirked. Be careful. Heroes burn out. Maybe, I said. But they burn bright first. We won that appeal. The man walked free after 12 years behind bars. As we left, Marcus Lang clapped me on the shoulder. You keep this up, Jamal, and one day they won't just be afraid of you in court, they'll be afraid of you everywhere. I thought about that. And I thought about my mom, sitting in the gallery at every hearing, never missing a word. Some nights, when the city is quiet, I still hear Harrow's first laugh in my head. The one he gave when he thought I was just the maid's kid playing dress-up. But I don't hear it as an insult anymore. I hear it as the first crack in the wall. And every case since has been another hammer blow. Because I know now law isn't about who gets invited to the table. It's about who pulls up a chair anyway and refuses to leave. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.